Section 5 of Lukundoo and Other Stories by Edward Lucas White. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Ben Tucker. The Snout, Chapter 3. Afoot, Thwaite led as confidently as he had driven the car. It was the stillest, pitchiest night I ever experienced, without light, air, sound, or smell to guide anyone. Through that fog, Thwaite sped like a man moving about his own bedroom, never for a second at a loss. "Here's the place," he said at a wall, and guided my hand to feel the ring bolt in the grass at its foot. Riven made a back for him, and I scrambled up on the two. Tiptoe on Thwaite's shoulders, I could just finger the coping. "Stay on my head, you fool," he whispered. I clutched the coping. Once astraddle of it, I let down one end of the silk ladder. "Fast!" breathed Thwaite from below. I drew it taut and went down. The first sweep of my fingers in the grass found the other ring bolt. I made the ladder fast and gave it the signal twitches. Riven came over first, then Thwaite. Through the park he led evenly. When he halted, he caught me by the elbow and asked, "Can you see any lights?" "Not a light," I told him. "Same here," he said. "There are no lights. Every window is dark. We're in luck." He led again for a while. Stopping, he said only, "Here's where you shin up. Cut every wire, but don't waste time cutting any twice." The details of his directions were exact. I found every handhold and foothold as he had schooled me, but I needed all my nerve. I realized that no heavyweight like Riven or Thwaite could have done it. When I came down, I was limp and tottery. "Just one swallow," Thwaite said, putting a flask to my lips. Then we went on. The night was so black and the fog so thick that I saw no loom of the building till we were against its wall. "Here's where you go in," Thwaite directed. Doubly I understood why I was with them. Neither could have squeezed through that aperture in the stone. I barely managed it. Inside, instead of the sliding crash I dreaded, I landed with a mere crunch. The coal in that bin was not anthracite. Likewise, the bin under the window was for soft coal. I blessed my luck and felt encouraged. The window I got open without too much work. Riven and Thwaite slid in. We crunched downhill 4 or 5 steps and stood on a firm floor. Riven flashed his electric candle boldly round. We were between a suit of trim coal bins and a battery of serried furnaces. There was no door at either end of the open space in which we stood. I had a momentary vision of the alternate windows and coal chutes above the bins, of 2 big panels of shiny colored tiling, of clear brickwork, fresh painted, jetty iron, and dazzling white brass-ringed asbestos, of a black vacancy between 2 furnaces. Toward that I half heard, half felt Riven turn. During the rest of our adventure he led. Thwaite followed, and I mostly tagged or groped after Thwaite, often judging of their position or movement by that combination of senses which is neither hearing nor touch, though partly both. Riven's torch flashed again. We were in a cement-floored, brick-walled passage with a door at each end, and on the side facing us doors in a bewildering row. In the darkness that came after the flash, I followed the others to the right. Well through the doorway we stood still, breathing and listening. When Riven illuminated our environment, we saw about us thousands of bottles, all set aslant, neck down, in tiers of racks that reached to the ceiling. Edging between them, we made the circuit of the cellar, but found no sign of any door, save that by which we had entered. A whispered growl from Riven, a nudge from Thwaite, and we went back the full length of the passage. Again we found ourselves in a wine vault, the duplicate of that we had left, and with the same peculiarity. Our curiosity overcame any prudence. Riven, instead of flashing his torch at intervals, kept the light steady, and we scrutinized, examined, and whispered our astonishment. As in its fellow, there was not in all this vault any spare space. The aisles were narrow, the racks reached the girders supporting the flat arches. Every rack was so full that a holder empty of its bottle was scarcely findable. And there was not in all that great cellar, there was not among all those tens of thousands of bottles, a magnum, or a quart, or even a pint. They were all splits. We handled a number, and all had the same label. I know now what the device was, from seeing it so often and so much larger afterwards. But there it seemed a picture of a skirt dancer leading an alligator by a dog chain. There was no name of any wine or liquor on any bottle, but each label had a red number, 17 or 45 or 328 above the picture, and under it, bottled for Hengist Eversley. "We know his name now," Thwaite whispered. Back in the passage, Riven took the first door to the left. It brought us to an easy stone stair between walls, which turned twice to the left at broad landings. When we trod a softer footing, we stood a long time breathing cautiously and listening. Presently, Riven flashed his light. It showed to our left a carpeted stair, the dull red carpet bulging up over thick pads and held down by brass stair rods, the polished, quartered oak of the molded door jamb or end of wainscot beyond it. The floor covering of brownish yellow or yellowish-brown linoleum or something similar made to look like inlaid wood, and the feet, legs, and thighs of a big, stocky man. The light shone but the fraction of a second, yet it showed plain his knee breeches, tight stockings on his big calves, and bright buckles at his knees and on his low shoes. There was no loud sound but the blurred, brushy noise of a mute struggle. I backed against a window-sill and could back no further. All I could hear was the shuffling, rasping sounds of the fight, and panting that became a sort of gurgle. Again the light flashed and stayed full bright. I saw that it was Thwaite struggling with the man, and that one of his big hands was on Thwaite's throat. Thwaite had him round the neck, and his face was against Thwaite's chest. His hair was brownish. Riven's slug shot crunched horribly on his skull. Instantly the light went out. Thwaite, radiating heat like a stove, stood gasping close by me. I heard no other noise after the body thudded on the floor, except that, on the carpeted stair, I seemed to hear light treads, as it were of a big dog or of a frightened child, padding away upward. "Did you hear anything?" I whispered. Riven punched me. After Thwaite was breathing naturally, he turned on his torch, and Riven did the same. The dead man was oldish, over 50, I should judge. Tall, large in all his dimensions, and spare, though heavy. His clothing was a gold-laced livery of green velvet, with green velvet knee breeches, green silk stockings, and green leather pumps. The 4 buckles were gold. Thwaite startled me by speaking out loud. "I take it, Riven," he said. "This is the trusted valet. He would have yelled if there had been anybody to call. Either we have this building to ourselves, or we have no one to deal with except Mr. Hengist Eversley." Riven grunted. "If he is here," Thwaite went on, "he's trying to send the alarm over the cut wires, or he's frightened and hiding. Let's find him and finish him if he's here, and then find his diamonds. Anyway, let's find those diamonds." Riven grunted. Swiftly they led from room to room and floor to floor. Not a door resisted. We'd been curious and astonished in the wine vaults. Above we were electrified and numb. We were in a palace of wonders, among such a profusion of valuables that even Riven, after the second or third opportunity, ceased any attempt to pocket or bag anything. We came upon nothing living, found no door locked, and apparently made the tour of the entire building. When they halted, I halted. We were delirious with amazement, frantic with inquisitiveness, frenzied with curiosity, incredulous, hysterical, dazed, and quivering. Thwaite spoke in the dark. "I'm going to see this place plain, all over it, if I die for it." They flashed their torches. We were right beside the body of the murdered footman. Riven and Thwaite did not seem to mind the corpse. They waved their torches until one fell on an electric light button. "Hope those wires are underground," Thwaite remarked. He pushed the button, and the electric lights came on full and strong. We were apparently at the foot of the back stairs, in a sort of lobby, an expanded passageway out of which opened several doors. We all 3 regarded the knobs of those doors, as we had half seen by flashlight on every door, everywhere. Each door had 2 knobs, one like any doorknob, the other about halfway between it and the floor. Riven opened one which proved to lead into a broom closet. He tried the knobs, Thwaite and I watching too. The lock and latch were at the upper knob, but controlled by either knob indifferently. They tried another door, but my eyes would roam to the dead body. Riven and Thwaite paid no more attention to it than if it had not been there. I'd never seen but one killed man before, and neither wanted to be reminded of that one, nor relish the sight of this one. I stared down the blackness of the stone stair up which we had come, or glanced into the dimness of the padded stairway. Then Riven, feeling inside the open door, found the button and turned on the lights. It was a biggish dining room, the four corners cut off by inset glass-framed shelf closets, full of china and glassware. The furniture was oak. "Servants' dining room," Dwight commented. Turning on the lights in each, we went through a series of rooms, a sort of sitting room, with card tables and checkerboards, a library walled with bookcases and open bookshelves, its two stout oak tables littered with magazines and newspapers, a billiard room with 3 tables, a billiard table, a pool table, and one for a bagatelle, a sort of lounging room, all leather-covered sofas and deep armchairs, an entry with hat hooks and umbrella stands, the outer door dark oak with a great deal of stained glass set in and around it. "All servants' rooms," Dwight commented. "Every bit of the furniture is natural man-size. Let's go on." Back we went along a passage and into a big kitchen beyond the dining room. "Never mind the pantries till we come down again," Dwight commanded. "Let's go upstairs. We'll do the banqueting hall after those bedrooms and the writing rooms and study last. I want a real sight of those pictures." They'd passed the dead flunky as if he had not been there at all. On the floor above, Thwaite touched Riven's elbow. "I forgot these," he said. We inspected a medium-sized sitting room with a round center table, an armchair drawn up by it, and in the armchair a magazine and a sort of wadded smoking jacket. Next to this room was a bedroom and a bathroom. "Mr. Footman's quarters," Thwaite remarked, staring unconcernedly at a photograph of a dumpy young woman and 2 small children set on the bureau. "All man-sized furniture here, too." Riven nodded. Up the second flight of that back stair we went again. It ended in a squarish hallway or lobby or room with nothing in it but 2 settees. It had 2 doors. Riven pushed one open, felt up and down for the electric button, and found it. We all 3 gasped. We almost shouted. We had had glimpses of this gallery before, but the flood of light from 1,000 bulbs under inverted trough reflectors dazzled us. The pictures fairly petrified us. The glare terrified me. "Surely we are crazy," I objected. "To make all this illumination, it's certain to give the alarm." "Alarm nothing," Thwaite snapped. "Haven't I watched these buildings night after night? I told you, he is never disturbed at any hour, lights or no lights." My feeble protests thus brushed away, I became absorbed, like the others, in those incredible paintings. Riven was merely stupidly dazed and uncomprehending wonder, Thwaite keenly speculative, questing for a clue to the origin of their peculiarities. I totally bewildered at the perfection of their execution, shivering at their uncanniness. The gallery was all of 90 feet long, nearly 30 feet wide, and high. Apparently it had a glass roof above the rectangle of reflectors. The pictures covered all 4 walls except the little door at either end. None was very small, and several were very large. A few were landscapes, but all had figures in them. Most were crowded with figures. Those figures! They were human figures, but not one had a human head. The heads were invariably those of birds, animals, or fishes, generally of animals, some of common animals, many of creatures I had seen pictures of or had heard of, some of imaginary creatures like dragons or griffins. More than half of the heads either of animals I knew nothing of or which had been invented by the painter. Close to me when the lights blazed out was a sea picture, blurred, grayish, foggy weather, and a heavy groundswell. A strange, otherworld open boat with fish heaped in the bottom of it, and standing among them 4 human figures in shining boots like rubber boots, and wet, shiny, loose coats like oilskins, only the boots and skins were red as claret, and the 4 figures had hyenas' heads. One was steering and the others were hauling at a net. Caught in the net was a sort of merman, but different from the pictures of mermaids. His shape was all human except the head and hands and feet. Every bit of him was covered with fish scales, all rainbowy. He had flat, broad fins in place of hands and feet, and his head was the head of a fat hog. He was thrashing about in the net, in an agony of impotent effort. Queer as the picture was, it had a compelling impression of reality, as if the scene were actually happening before our eyes. Next it was a picnic in a little meadow by a pond between woods, with mountains behind it higher up. Every one of the picnickers about the white tablecloth spread on the grass had the head of a different animal, one of a sheep, one of a camel, and the rest of animals like deer, not one of them known to me. Then next to that was a fight of two compound creatures shaped like centaurs, only they had bulls' bodies with human torsos growing out of them, where the necks ought to be. The arms, scaly snakes with open mouth, biting heads in place of hands. And instead of human heads, rooster heads, bills open and pecking. Under the creatures, in place of bulls' hoofs, were yellow roosters' legs, stouter than chicken legs, and with short, thick toes and long, sharp spurs like game roosters. Yet these fantastic chimeras appeared altogether alive, and their movements looked natural. Yes, that's the word. Natural. Every picture was as complete a staggerer as these first three. Every one was signed in the lower left-hand corner in neat smallish letters of bright gold paint. Hengist Eversley. "Mr. Hengist Eversley is a lunatic, that's certain," Thwaite commented, "but he unquestionably knows how to paint." There must have been more than 50 pictures in that gallery, maybe as many as 75, and every one a nightmare. Beyond was a shorter gallery of the same width, end on to the side of the first, and beyond that the duplicate of the first, the three taking up 3 sides of the building. The fourth side was a studio, the size of the second gallery. It had a great skylight of glass tilted sideways all along over one whole wall. It was whitewashed, very plain and empty looking, with 2 easels, a big one and a little one. On the little one was a picture of some vegetables and 5 or 6 little fairies, as it were, with children's bodies and mice's heads, nibbling at a carrot. On the big one was a canvas mostly blank. One side of it had a palm tree and splashy thick slaps of paint, and under it 3 big crabs with coconuts in their claws. A man's feet and legs showed beside them, and the rest was unfinished. The 3 galleries had fully 300 paintings, for the smaller gallery contained only small canvases, besides being impressed with the grotesqueness of the subjects and the perfection of the drawing and coloring. 2 things struck me as to the pictures collectively. First, there was not represented in any one of all those paintings any figure of a woman, or any female shape of any kind. The beast-headed figures were all, whether clothed or nude, figures of men. The animals, as far as I could see, were all males. Secondly, nearly half of the pictures were modifications or parallels or emulations, I could hardly say travesties or imitations, of well-known pictures by great artists, paintings I had seen in public galleries or knew from engravings or photographs or reproductions in books or magazines. There was a picture like Washington crossing the Delaware, and another like Washington saying farewell to his generals. There was a batch of Napoleon pictures, after the paintings of Napoleon at Austerlitz, at Friedland, giving the eagles to his regiments, on the morning of Waterloo, coming down the steps at Fontainebleau, and on the deck of the ship going to St. Helena. There were dozens of other pictures of generals or kings or emperors reviewing victorious armies. 2 or 3 of Lincoln, one that hit me hardest, obviously, after some picture I had never seen or heard of the ghost of Lincoln, far larger than a life-size man, towering above the surviving notabilities of his time on the grandstand, reviewing the homecoming Federal Army marching through Washington. In every one of these pictures, the dominant figure, whether it stood for Lincoln, Napoleon, Washington, or some other general or ruler, whatever uniform or regalia clothed its human shape, had the same head. The heads of the fighting men in all these pictures were those of dogs, all alike in any one picture but differing from one to another. Terriers or wolfhounds or mastiffs or what not. The heads of any men, not soldiers, were those of oxen or sheep or horses, or some other mild sort of animal. The head of the dominant figure I then took to be invented, legendary, fabulous. Oh, that's not the word I want. Mythological? I suggested, the only interruption I interjected into his entire narrative. Yes, mythological, he returned. I thought it was a mythological creature. The long-jawed head like a hound's, the little pointed yellow beard under the chin, the black, naked ears like a hairless dog's ears, and yet not doggy either. The ridge of hair on top of the skull, the triangular shape of the whole head, the close-set, small, beady, terribly knowing eyes, the brilliant patches of color on either side of the muzzle. All these made a piercing impression of individuality, and yet seemed not so much actual as mythological. It takes a great deal longer to tell what we saw on that 3rd floor than it took to see it. All round the galleries under the pictures were cases of drawers, solidly built in one length like a counter and about as high. Thwaite went down one side of the gallery and Riven down the other, pulling them out and slamming them shut again. All I saw held photographs of pictures, but Riven and Thwaite were taking no chances and looked into every drawer. I had plenty of time to gaze about me, and circulated at a sort of cantering trot around the green velvet miniature sofas and settees placed back to back down the middle of the floor space. It seemed to me that Mr. Hengist Eversley was a great master of figure and landscape drawing, color, light, and perspective. As we went down the duplicate staircase at the other corner from where we came up, Thwaite said, "Now for those bedrooms." By the stair we found another valet's or footman's apartment, sitting room, bedroom, and bathroom, just like the one by the other stair, and there were 4 more between them, under the studio and over the lounging rooms. On the east and west sides of the building were the bedrooms, 12 apartments, 6 on each side, each of the 12 made up of a bedroom, a dressing room, and a bathroom. The beds were about 3 feet long and proportionately narrow and low. The furniture, bureaus, tables, chairs, chest of drawers, and the rest harmonized with the dimensions of the beds, except the cheval glasses and wall mirrors which reached the ceilings. The bathtubs were almost pools, about 9 feet by 6 and all of 3 feet deep, each a single block of porcelain. The shapes and sizes and styles of the furniture were duplicated all through, but the colors varied, so that the 12 suites were in 12 colors: black, white, gray, and brown, and light and dark yellow, red, green, and blue. Wall coverings, hangings, carpets, and rugs all to match in each suite. The panels of the walls had the same picture, however, repeated over and over, 2, 4, 6 times to a room, and in every suite alike. This picture was the design I had failed to make out on the labels of the bottles. It was set as a medallion in each panel of the blue or red walls or whatever other color they were. The background of the picture was a vague sort of palish sky and blurred hazy clouds above tropical-looking foliage. The chief figure was an angel in flowing white robes, floating on silvery plumed wings widespread. The angel's face was a human face, the only human face in any picture in that great palace, the face of a grave, gentle, rather girlish young man. The creature the angel was leading was a huge, bulky crocodile, with a gold collar about its neck, and a gold chain from that, not to the angel's hand, but to a gold fetter about his wrist. Under each picture was a verse of 4 lines, always the same. "Let not your baser nature drag you down. Utter no whimper, not one sigh or moan. Hopeless of respite, solace, palm, or crown. Live out your life, unflinching and alone." I saw it so often I shall never forget it. The bathrooms were luxurious in the extreme. A needle bath, a shower bath, 2 basins of different sizes in each, besides the sunk pool tub. The dressing rooms has each a variety of wardrobes. 1 or 2 we opened, finding in each several suits of little clothes, as if for a boy under 6 years old. One closet had shelf above shelf of small shoes, not much over 4 inches long. "Evidently," Thwaite remarked, "Hengist Eversley is a dwarf, whatever else he is." Riven left the wardrobes and closets alone after the first few. Each bedroom had in it nothing but the bed, and on each side of it a sort of wine cooler, like a pail with a lid, but bigger, set on 3 short legs, so that its top was level with the bed. We opened most of them. Every one we opened was filled with ice, bedded in which were several half-pint bottles. Every one of the 12 beds had the covers carefully turned down. Not one showed any sign of having been occupied. The wine coolers were solid silver, but we left them where they were. As Thwaite remarked, it would have taken 2 full-size freight cars to contain the silver we had seen. In the dressing rooms, the articles like brushes and combs on the bureaus were all of gold, and most set with jewels. Riven began to fill a bag with those entirely of metal, but even he made no attempt to tear the backs off the brushes or to waste energy on any other breakage. By the time we had scanned the 12 suites, Riven could barely carry his bag. The front room on the south side of the building was a library full of small, showily bound books in glass-fronted cases all the way to the ceiling, covering every wall except where the 2 doors and 6 windows opened. There were small, narrow tables, the height of those in the dressing rooms. There were magazines on them and papers. Thwaite opened a bookcase and I another, and we looked at 3 or 4 books. Each had in it a book plate with the device of the angel and the crocodile. Riven did not find the electric button in the main hallway, and we went down the great, broad, curving stair by our electric candles. Riven turned to the left, and we found ourselves in the banquet hall, as Thwaite had called it, a room all of 40 by 30 and gorgeous beyond any description. The diminutive table, not 3 feet square, was a slab of crystal white glass, set on silver-covered legs. The tiny armchair, the only chair in the big room, was solid silver, with a crimson cushion loose in it. The sideboards and glass-fronted closets paralyzed us. One had fine china and cut glass, wonderful china and glass. But 4 held a table service of gold, all of pure gold. Forks, knives, spoons, plates, bowls, platters, cups, everything. All miniature, but with a profusion of everything. We hefted the pieces. They were gold. All the pieces were normal in shape, except that instead of wine glasses, goblets, and tumblers were things like broad gravy boats on stems or short feet, all lopsided, with one projecting edge like the mouth of a pitcher, only broader and flatter. There were dozens of these. Riven filled 2 bags with what 2 bags would hold. The 3 bags were all we could carry. Must have been over 150 pounds apiece. "We'll have to make 2 trips to the wall," Thwaite said. "You brought 6 bags, didn't you, Riven?" Riven grunted. At the foot of the grand staircase, Riven found the electric button and flooded the magnificent stairway with light. The stair itself was all white marble, the rails yellow marble, and the paneling of the dado malachite, but the main feature was the painting above the landing. This was the most amazing of all the paintings we had come upon. I remembered something like it, an advertisement of a root beer or talcum powder, or some other proprietary article, representing all the nations of the earth and their rulers in the foreground, congratulating the orator. This picture was about 20 feet wide and higher than its width. There was a throne, a carved and jeweled throne, set on an eminence. There was a wide view on either side of the throne, and all filled with human figures, with animal heads, an infinite throng all facing the throne. Nearest it were figures that seemed meant for all the presidents and kings and queens and emperors of the world. I recognized the robes or uniforms of some of them. Some had heads taken from their national coat of arms, like the heads of the Austrian and Russian eagles. All these figures were paying homage to the figure that stood before the throne. The same monster we had seen in place of Lincoln or Washington or Napoleon in the paintings upstairs. He stood proudly with one foot on a massive crocodile. He was dressed in a sort of revolutionary uniform, low shoes with gold buckles, white stockings and knee breeches, a red waistcoat, and a bright blue coat. His head was the same beast head of the other pictures, triangular and strange, which I then thought mythological. Above and behind the throne floated, on outspread silver wings, the white-robed angel with the Sir Galahad face. Riven shut off the lights almost instantly, but even in the few breaths while I looked I saw it all. The 3 sacks of swag we put down by the front door. The room opposite the banquet hall was a music room, with an organ and a piano, both with keys and keyboards far smaller than usual, great cases of music books, an array of brass instruments and cellos, and more than 100 violin cases. Thwaite opened 1 or 2. "These'd be enough to make our fortune," he said, "if we could get away with them." Beyond the music room was the study. It had in it 4 desks, miniature in size, and the old-fashioned model with drawers below, a lid to turn down and form a writing surface, and a sort of bookcase above with a peaked top. All were carved, and on the lids and the carving we read, "Journal, Music, Criticism, Business." Thwaite opened the desk marked "Business" and pulled open the drawers. In pigeonholes of the desk were bundles of new, clean greenbacks and treasury notes of higher denominations, 5 each of 5, 10s, 20s, 50s, and 100s. Thwaite tossed 1 bundle of each to me and Riven and pocketed the rest. He bulged. One drawer had a division down the middle. One half was full of $10 gold pieces, the other half of 20s. "I've heard of misers," said Thwaite, "but this beats hell. Think of that crazy dwarf, a prisoner in this palace, running his hands through this and gloating over the cash he can never use." Riven loaded a bag with the coin, and when he had them all, he could barely lift the bag. Leaving it where it lay before the desk, he strode the length of the room and tried the door at the end. It was fast. Instantly, Riven and Thwaite were like two terriers after a rat. "This is where the diamonds are," Thwaite declared, "and Mr. Hengist Eversley is in there with 'em." He and Riven conferred a while together. "You kneel low," Thwaite whispered. "Duck when you open it. He'll fire over you. Then you've got him, see?" Riven tiptoed to the door, knelt, and tried key after key in the lock. There were at least 20 bulbs in the chandelier of that room, and the light beat down on him. His red neck dew-lapped over the low collar of his lavenderish shirt. His great, broad back showed vast and powerful. On the other side of the doorway, Thwaite stood, his finger at the electric button. Each had his slug shot in his left hand. They had spun the cylinders of their revolvers and stuck them in their belts in front before Riven began work on the lock. I heard a click. Riven put up his hand. The lights went out. In the black dark we stood until I could almost see the outlines of the windows, less black against the intenser blackness. Soon I heard another click in the grate of an opened door. Then a kind of snarl, a thump like a blow, a sort of strangling gasp, and the cushiony sounds of a struggle. Thwaite turned on the lights. Riven was in the act of staggering up from his knees. I saw a pair of small pink hands, the fingers intertwined, locked behind Riven's neck. They slipped apart as I caught sight of them. I had a vision of small feet in little patent leather silver buckled low shoes, of green socks, of diminutive legs and white trousers flashing right and left in front of Riven, as if he held by the throat a struggling child. Next I saw that his arms were thrown up, wide apart. He collapsed and fell back his full length with a dull crash. Then I saw the snout, saw the wolf's jaws viced on his throat, saw the blood welling round the dazzling white fangs, and recognized the reality of the sinister head I had seen over and over in his pictures. Riven made the fish-out-of-water contortions of a man being killed. Thwaite brought his slung-shot down on the beast-head skull. The blow was enough to crush in a steel cylinder. The beast wrinkled its snout and shook its head from side to side, worrying like a bulldog at Riven's throat. Again Thwaite struck, and again and again. At each blow the portentous head oscillated viciously. The awful thing about it to me was the two blue bosses on each side of the muzzle, like enamel, shiny and hard-looking, and the hideous welt of red like fresh sealing wax down between them and along the snout. Riven's struggles grew weaker as the great teeth tore at his throat. He was dead before Thwaite's repeated blows drove in the splintered skull, and the clenched jaws relaxed, the snout crinkling and contracting as the dog teeth slid from their hold. Thwaite gave the monster 2 or 3 more blows, touched Riven, and fairly dashed out of the room, shouting, "You stay here!" I heard the sound of prying and sawing. There alone I looked but once at the dead cracksman. The thing that had killed him was the size of a 4 to 6-year-old child, but more stockily built, looked entirely human up to the neck, and was dressed in a coat of bright dark blue, a vest of crimson velvet, and white duck trousers. As I looked, the muzzle wriggled for the last time. The jaws fell apart, and the carcass rolled sideways. It was the very duplicate in miniature of the figure in the big picture on the staircase landing. Thwaite came dashing back. Without any sign of any qualm, he searched Riven and tossed me 2 or 3 bundles of greenbacks. He stood up. He laughed. "Curiosity," he said, "will be the death of me." Then he stripped the clothing from the dead monster, kneeling by it. The beast hair stopped at the shirt collar. Below that the skin was human, as was the shape of a 40-year-old man, strong and vigorous and well-made, only dwarfed to the smallness of a child. Across the hairy breast was tattooed in blue, Hengist Eversley. "Hell," said Thwaite. He stood up and went to the fatal door. Inside he found the electric button. The room was small and lined with cases of little drawers, tier on tier, rows of brass knobs on mahogany. Thwaite opened one. It was velvet-lined and grooved like a jeweler's tray and contained rings, the settings apparently emeralds. Thwaite dumped them into one of the empty bags he had taken from Riven's corpse. The next case was of similar drawers, of rings set with rubies. The first of these Thwaite dumped in with the emeralds. But then he flew round the room, pulling out drawers and slamming them shut, until he came upon trays of unset diamonds. These he emptied into his sack to the last of them. Then diamond rings on them, other jewelry set with diamonds, then rubies and emeralds till the sack was full. He tied its neck, had me open a second sack, and was dumping drawer after drawer into that, when suddenly he stopped. His nose worked horridly like that of the dead monster. I thought he was going crazy, and was beginning to laugh nervously. Was on the verge of hysterics when he said, "Smell! Try what you smell." I sniffed. "I smell smoke," I said. "So do I," he agreed. "This place is afire." "And we locked in," I exclaimed. "Locked in?" he sneered. "Bosh, I broke open the front door the instant I was sure they were dead. Come, drop that empty bag. This is no time for haggling." We had to step between the two corpses. Riven was horribly dead. The colors had all faded from the snout. The muzzle was all mouse color. When we had hold of the bag of coin, Thwaite turned off the electric lights, and we struggled out with that and the bag of jewels, and went out into the hallway full of smoke. "We can carry only these," Thwaite warned me. "We'll have to leave the rest." I shouldered the bag of coin and followed him down the steps, across a gravel road, and oh, the relief of treading turf and feeling the fog all about me. At the wall, Thwaite turned and looked back. "No chance to try for those other bags," he said. In fact, the red glow was visible at that distance and was fast becoming a glare. I heard shouts. We got the bags over the wall and reached the car. Thwaite cranked up at once, and we were off. How we went I could not guess, nor in what directions, nor even how long. Ours was the only vehicle on the roads we darted along. When the dawn light was near enough for me to see, Thwaite stopped the car. He turned to me. "Get out," he said. "What?" I asked. He shoved his pistol muzzle in my face. "You've $50,000 in bank bills in your pockets," he said. "It's a half a mile down that road to a railway station. Do you understand English? Get out." I got out. The car shot forward into the morning fog and was gone. 4. He was silent a long time. "What did you do then?" I asked. "Headed for New York," he said, "and got on a drunk. When I came round, I had barely $11,000. I headed for Cook's office and bargained for a $10,000 tour of the world, the most places and the longest time they'd give for the money, the whole cost on them. I not to need a cent after I started." "What day was that?" I asked. He meditated and gave me some approximate indications, rather rambling and roundabout. "What did you do after you left Cook's?" I asked. "I put $100 in a savings bank," he said, "bought a lot of clothes and things, and started. I kept pretty sober all around the world because the only way to get full was by being treated, and I had no cash to treat back with. When I landed in New York, I thought I was all right for life, but no sooner did I have my $100-and-odd in my pockets than I got full again. I don't seem able to keep sober." "Are you sober now?" I asked. "Sure," he asserted. He seemed to shed his cosmopolitan vocabulary the moment he came back to everyday matters. "Let's see you write what I tell you on this," I suggested, handing him a fountain pen and a torn envelope, turned inside out. Word by word after my dictation he wrote. "Until you hear from me again, yours truly, No Name." I took the paper from him and studied the handwriting. "How long were you on that spree?" I asked. "Which?" he twinkled. "Before you came to and had but $11,000 left," I explained. "I don't know," he said. "I didn't know anything I'd been doing." "I can tell you one thing you did," I said. "What?" he queried. "You put 4 packets, each of 100 $100 bills, in a thin manila clasp envelope, directed it to a New York lawyer, and mailed the envelope to him with no letter in it, only a half sheet of dirty paper with nothing on it except, 'Keep this for me until I ask for it,' and the signature you have just written." "Honest?" he enunciated incredulously. "Fact," I said. "Then you believe what I've told you," he exclaimed joyfully. "Not a bit I don't," I asseverated. "How's that?" he asked. "If you were drunk enough," I explained, "to risk $40,000 in that crazy way, you were drunk enough to dream all the complicated nightmare you've spun out to me." "If I did," he argued, "how did I get the $50,000-odd?" "I'm willing to suppose you got it with no more dishonesty on your part," I told him, "than if you had come by it as you described." "It makes me mad you won't believe me," he said. "I don't," I finished. He gloomed in silence. Presently he said, "I can stand looking at him now," and led the way to the cage where the big blue-nosed mandrill chattered his inarticulate bestialities and scratched himself intermittently. He stared at the brute. "And you don't believe me?" he regretted. "No, I don't," I repeated. "And I'm not going to. The thing's incredible." "Couldn't there be a mongrel, a hybrid?" he suggested. "Put that out of your head," I told him. "The whole thing's incredible." "Suppose she'd seen a critter like this," he persisted. "Just at the wrong time." "Bosh," I said. "Old wives' tales, superstition, impossibility." "His head," he declared, "was just like that." He shuddered. "Somebody put drops in some of your drink," I suggested. "Anyhow, let's talk about something else. Come and have lunch with me." Over the lunch, I asked him, "What city did you like best of all you saw?" "Paris for mine," he grinned. "Paris forever." "I tell you what I advise you to do," I said. "What's that?" he asked, his eyes bright on mine. "Let me buy you an annuity with your $40,000, I explained. "An annuity payable in Paris. There's enough interest already to pay your way to Paris and leave you some cash till the first quarterly payment comes due." "You wouldn't feel yourself defrauding the Eversleighs?" he questioned. "If I'm defrauding any people," I said, "I don't know who they are." "How about the fire?" he insisted. "I'll bet you heard of it. Don't the dates agree?" "The dates agree," I admitted. And the servants were all dismissed, the remaining buildings and walls torn down, and the place cut up and sold in portions, just about as it would have been if your story were true. "There now!" he ejaculated. "You do believe me?" "I do not," I insisted, "and the proof is that I'm ready to carry out my annuity plan for you." "I agree," he said, and stood up from the lunch table. "Where are we going now?" he inquired as we left the restaurant. "Just you come with me," I told him, "and ask no questions." I piloted him to the Museum of Archaeology and led him circuitously to what I meant for an experiment on him. I dwelt on other subjects nearby and waited for him to see it himself. He saw. He grabbed me by the arm. "That's him," he whispered. "Not the size, but his very expression, in all his pictures." He pointed to that magnificent, enigmatical black diorite 12th dynasty statue which represents neither Anubis nor Seth, but some nameless, cynocephalous god. "That's him," he repeated. "Look at that awful wisdom of him." I said nothing. "And you brought me here," he cried. "You meant me to see this. You do believe." "No," I maintained. "I do not believe." 5. After I waved a farewell to him from the pier, I never saw him again. We had an extensive correspondence 6 months later, when he wanted his annuity exchanged for a joint life annuity for himself and his bride. I arranged it for him, with less difficulty than I had anticipated. His letter of thanks, explaining that a French wife was so great an economy that the shrinkage in his income was more than made up for, was the last I heard from him. As he died more than a year ago and his widow is already married, the story can do him no harm. If the Eversleighs were defrauded, they will never feel it, and my conscience, at least, gives me no twinges. End of Section 5. The Snout, Chapters 3 through 5.